in this effort. And so it's great to see us all come together this morning. Again, I think I got a thumbs up. And so perhaps we are live. So those of you who are joining us live on the web stream, I was expounding to the group here in the room that it's great to get together. I'm Brian Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization. I'm also the Director of the National Energy Technology Laboratory within the Department of Energy. And it is a great pleasure to convene here today, and I'm extremely honored to be here in this room with our nation's energy community partners, many of you live and on our web stream. We come together today to celebrate our 2-year anniversary of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities, and for the rest of the morning I'm probably going to say IWG, and our ongoing efforts to drive some truly historic investments by the Biden-Harris administration into our coal and power plants and energy communities across the country as the nation is transitioning to a clean energy economy to urgently address our climate crisis. Many traditional fossil energy workers in the communities in which they live and work and play are at risk of being left behind despite their critical role in powering our nation for the last century or more. I am someone who grew up in West Virginia. I'm a grandson of a coal miner, and I have a deeply personal appreciation for what communities go through during this economic transition and what this means to local communities. It's communities like these that I grew up in and the President's commitment to investing in the American economy that inspired President Biden in his first week in office to sign Executive Order 14008, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, establishing this interagency working group for us to challenge 11 federal agencies to come together and support energy workers and the communities by breaking down the barriers to accessing federal funds and to support these communities to revitalize their economies in the long term. We prioritize 25 different communities across the country that require immediate access to local transportation, affordable local transportation, broadband, good roads, clean water, and to help ensure that they can participate in this energy transition. And through this IWG, the Biden-Harris administration is driving historic federal investments to hard-hit energy communities around the country, and we'll hear today about some really exciting opportunities. Looking back over the last 2 years, we've invested over $480 million of American Rescue Plan funds for economic development in coal communities, $877 million in abandoned mine land reclamation, and $134 million in the largest ever Appalachian Regional Commission award to coal communities. These historic efforts by the administration will make lasting changes in our energy communities in their energy transition. So that's partly why we're here today, is to celebrate what's happened over the last 2 years, but have a series of exciting announcements as we look forward to the next 2 years of our work in coal and power plants and energy communities. And so my federal colleagues and I are here to celebrate, but also to make sure we're listening. We want to listen to the stakeholders here in the room to make sure that we are doing the right things for the communities to not leave them behind. And so now I invite John Potessa, the Senior Advisor to the President for Clean Energy Innovation and Implementation, to share some exciting news about how the administration will continue to support energy communities in this transition to clean energy. So John, if you could come to the podium, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, and welcome everyone to the White House. It's great to be with you here. I want to start by embarrassing Brian. He has done a fabulous job, and I think we should all give him a round of applause. As he noted, President Biden recognizes the contribution of the people who have worked hard in America's energy communities for generations, making our nation a global power, fueling us through both world wars, driving our prosperity for the last century. As Brian noted, during their first week in office, President Biden and Vice President Harris affirmed our administration's commitment to make sure those same workers power our nation in the next century. 2 years later, this interagency working group is turning that vision into a reality. You can read all about that in the new report that has been issued today. But I'll give you some highlights. In April of 2021, this group identified $38 billion in federal funding that was relevant and accessible for energy communities. Now, that number totals more than $500 billion. It includes 22 tax credits from across the federal government. The amount of federal support is so much bigger in large part because of President Biden's Investing in America agenda. The bipartisan infrastructure law, it's been noted, caps abandoned oil and gas wells, expands transmission to clean energy to get to rural communities, and launches projects in industries like carbon capture and green hydrogen, green ammonia, as the Secretary and I were just discussing, that demand the same skills fossil fuel workers already have. The CHIPS and Science Act invests in domestic semiconductor manufacturing so we can build clean energy technologies here in America with American workers. And the Inflation Reduction Act unleashes the potential of the private sector to scale up clean energy manufacturing in communities across the nation while making those same technologies affordable for working families. It creates a tax credit for manufacturing projects that re-equip existing facilities with clean or carbon-cutting technology, with 40% set aside specifically for projects in coal communities. And today, we're announcing a bonus credit of 10% on top of the IRA's investment in production credits. That's going to be a powerful driver that incentivizes clean energy projects in energy communities. You'll hear more about that in a few minutes from Secretary Yellen. In short, these three laws are game changers for energy communities and everything this interagency working group stands for. They've already fueled a boom in clean energy investments from the private sector, over $200 billion since President Biden took office, and at least more than $70 billion since the passage of the IRA alone. Those new and expanded operations are coming to energy communities and creating good-paying jobs. But as I say often, it's one thing to pass a bill, it's a completely different thing to implement it. That's why we're proud to announce today a memorandum of understanding signed by 11 different federal agencies who have agreed to work together to get this new funding into energy communities and make sure that they get the technical assistance and capacity support that they need. As a former White House Chief of Staff, I can say for certain that it's very rare to have that many agencies agree on anything. And it's a good thing because we have to work together to maximize the impact of the President's agenda for energy communities. A big part of that is making sure energy communities know about these opportunities and have the capacity and resources to apply for them. That's why this interagency working group launched an online clearinghouse to share federal funding opportunities and connect energy communities to technical assistance. And it's why we've spent the past 2 years meeting communities where they are, hosting listening sessions and webinars for local stakeholders and incorporating their feedback into our work. There's enormous untapped potential in these communities, from fossil fuel workers whose skills we need to build the industries of the future, to existing facilities that can be retooled and repurposed, to local entrepreneurs and universities who are working to attract talent and investment. The people in this room, our partners across the country, and the whole of the Biden-Harris administration are committed to making sure that energy communities lead the 21st century economy. So thank you again for being here and for the work you're doing. With that, I'll hand it back to Brian for our next speaker.
John, thank you very much. And the Inflation Reduction Act is truly transformative and helps empower those rapid response teams that we've launched. It's now my pleasure to invite Ali Zaidi, Assistant to the President and National Climate Advisor, to share how these efforts will further reinforce the President's commitment to tackling the current climate crisis and ensuring no one's left behind. Ali.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here, and this feels like a reunion from the last several years, spending a lot of time with many of you on Google Chat and Google Hangout and Zoom, and very rarely in person. So this is exciting homecoming here. I think if you look over the course of the last 2.5 years, the report that Brian and team put out today about the progress we've made, hopefully you see yourselves as authors in that work. We don't get here in this moment because of some inevitable cascade of events. This convening and the progress that we've made is the output of very purposeful effort. And purposeful effort by an unusual group of people coming together. We've got analysts in the room and investors. We've got folks from industry and from labor, environmental, NGOs, and you've got 11 federal agencies standing here shoulder to shoulder with all of you. One of the authors of the progress that we have made, and not just because I'm paid to say this, but for real, is Joe Biden and his personal and deep commitment. Folks know this if you know him from Claymont, Delaware, or you know him from 2009 or 2016 or 2020 or every year, every day of this administration. This is something that goes to his core, the task of lifting up our workers and our communities. And I remember we're getting ready to he was getting ready to sign the executive order on January 27th, and he was very particular in his remarks. He wanted to make sure every single community was called out by name, every single person was named, and the reason he wanted to be so clear was because he knew it wasn't just going to take his administration to follow through on the commitment that we had, but everybody working across both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue, and everyone from coast to coast leaning into not just a challenge, but a profound opportunity. And every day since then, he has reminded his team that our job on the climate team is not to be just greenhouse gas accountants, although our climate goals are challenging and we've got to measure our way through the progress, but that we're all called on to be part of a much bigger project. And that's the project of uplift, the project of bringing steel back into the spine of the American middle class that has been systematically disinvested in for decades. This is the project of building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And as Brian said, you know, the contours of that climate strategy are really threefold. The first is bringing people in who so often have felt left out of this fight. And I think of folks like Phil Smith, who's been really our partner in drafting key provisions of what you see in the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, making sure that mine workers who maybe lost an opportunity to work in the mines in the last several decades are at the front of the line as we seal the mines that have been abandoned, that they are at the front of the line as we forge new industries like the battery industry that's taking over and taking off in places and creating tremendous opportunity. The second is this focus on places, right? It's not just people and we say, hey, we got a job for you in a completely different geography. It's the places that folks have invested in, not just in this generation, but for many. A culture, a community, a sense of place and purpose and dignity that's all embedded in geographies. And so that's why I think one of the important facets of the way we have done this work, and I was with Brian and Deputy Secretary Turk and others in New Mexico as we launched one of these rapid response teams with Secretary Holland. Those places will be the venue where we come up with the ideas that we forge together and implement together. There, it was so exciting to see the Navajo Nation at the table talking about how they're going to use dollars from the infrastructure law, not just to see solar be built in their backyard, but to own, to have an equity stake in the economic upside that comes with this transformation. And then finally, a focus on projects, a focus on projects. And it's, you know, if you worked in climate, you worked in clean energy, maybe if you've worked in revitalization of energy communities, folks like Jason Walsh for several decades, it's really easy to come up with pie-in-the-sky plans, right? The big banner press release. What's hard is to build the projects. And if anything, this moment will be judged by our success in building those projects. That's how our progress will be measured. And by that metric, I think by that metric, we are being successful finally and being responsive to the responsibility we have to folks who have powered our economic progress, our economic competitiveness for decades, for centuries. Yesterday, the president was in Minnesota highlighting his Invest in America agenda. And it's not lost on me that he was there at a facility that used to make diesel engines that's now making electrolyzers to harness electricity or harness a clean fuel by passing electricity through water. And by the way, as he's up there, he's meeting with CEOs from Xcel Energy who are building the state's largest solar farm at the site of a retiring coal plant. And not only are they building solar, they're also putting storage there, and storage that will be constructed, the batteries manufactured in a former steel town in West Virginia. That's the potential for the transformation we have, not only to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we will 50 to 52% by 2030, but to lift up people, places, and projects that define this moment and define a better future for this country. Thank you.
Ollie, thank you very much. And next, I'd like to welcome Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to share some tremendously exciting and transformative news about the Inflation Reduction Act. Secretary Yellen.
Thank you, Brian. I want to first commend this group for its hard work over the past 2 years in support of our nation's energy communities. I want to thank Secretary Granholm and the Department of Energy for coordinating this working group and advising Treasury across a range of clean energy tax policies. And I especially want to thank Senator Manchin for his leadership, as well as for his decades of work ensuring that coal communities have a place at the table. For too long, economic opportunity has been disproportionately concentrated in a few big cities and on the coasts. But as all of you know, investments in clean energy can create opportunities across the country. And this includes communities like coal communities, whose economies have historically depended on traditional energy production. Coal workers and residents in energy communities have been the backbone of the American economy for decades, and they must be at the center of our nationwide economic investment. When President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, he enacted a law that is not only designed to tackle climate change and spur clean energy development, he signed legislation that's crafted to promote broad-based economic opportunity across the United States. And already, the Inflation Reduction Act is driving an economic renewal by supporting good-paying jobs and lowering costs for American families. It's fostered the rise of a battery belt across the Midwest and the South. It's mobilized tens of billions of dollars in investments across the clean energy supply chain. And as others have said, the Inflation Reduction Act is, at its core, about turning the climate crisis into an economic opportunity. Treasury is playing a central role in the Inflation Reduction Act's implementation effort. An estimated $270 billion of the law's investments is delivered via tax incentives, and we have been quite busy in our implementation, working vigorously to deploy the law quickly and effectively. I want to highlight 2 milestones today: the Advanced Energy Project Credit and the Energy Communities Bonus. In February, we took a significant step toward partnering with the Department of Energy to reestablish the Advanced Energy Project Credit. This tax credit is not new, but the Inflation Reduction Act expanded it and provided $10 billion in new funding. The Advanced Energy Project Credit aims to strengthen U.S. industrial competitiveness and energy security. It provides an investment tax credit of up to 30% that can be allocated to projects in clean energy technology manufacturing and recycling, industrial decarbonization, and critical materials processing, refining, and recycling. Importantly, of the total $10 billion available, at least $4 billion must go to projects in communities where coal mines or coal-fired power plants have closed. The earlier version of the Advanced Energy Project Credit had a major impact, and I expect we will see many more exciting new opportunities in this current iteration. The application process will begin next month. Today, we're taking another significant step forward with the release of guidance for the Inflation Reduction Act's Energy Community Bonus. Many energy communities have the knowledge, the infrastructure, and the resources to take advantage of the clean energy transition. But in many cases, these communities would benefit significantly from an initial public investment to jumpstart that process. This provision provides a bonus investment credit of up to 10 percentage points of clean energy investments in energy communities, or a bonus credit of 10% for clean energy production in energy communities. This generally means that if you're a solar farm operator in a coal community, you can get an extra dime on the dollar for your investment in a new facility. To take full advantage of this bonus, project developers will need to pay workers in accordance with local prevailing wages and use a sufficient proportion of apprentices on the job. These provisions will ensure that workers in energy communities reap the benefits of the clean energy economy they are helping to build. This guidance will ensure that coal communities and other qualifying jurisdictions are at the center of our clean energy future. Our guidance today provides clarity around how projects qualify for the bonus. In the coming weeks, we'll roll out additional tools to help taxpayers identify communities where the bonus credit will apply. This bonus will further help support investment, clean energy development, and job creation in energy communities. And ultimately, it serves as a milestone toward our vision of a clean energy future where opportunity is broadly distributed across areas that have too often been left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen. And the announcements of the guidance on the IRA, I know, is very exciting to energy communities. The partnership between the Department of Energy and the Treasury is really to be commended, and you can find some more information on the guidance at our Energy Communities one-stop shop at energycommunities.gov. And so next, it's my great pleasure to ask to the podium Energy Secretary and Administrator of the Energy Communities IWG, Jennifer Granholm, to share about some new online resources and some exciting announcements out of the Department of Energy. Madam Secretary.
All right, thank you, Brian, for all your great work. Thanks to all of you as well. You know, a year ago, I had the pleasure of going to Charleston for one of the intergovernmental interagency work group meetings. Brian was there. Gail Manchin, I think you were there. Karen Skelton was there orchestrating away. Brandon, I think you were there. And we heard from all of these companies that were interested in investing in West Virginia. And they were nuclear companies, they were nuclear power. They were companies that were interested in storage, in both in solar. I mean, there was just a whole array. And I remember there in Charleston that saying that the Biden administration saw a phoenix rising in Appalachia. And that was before the passage of the IRA, of the Inflation Reduction Act. I feel like that phoenix is this new energy economy taking shape. And with it, of course, the promise of economic revitalization for all these communities. And over the past 2 years, that phoenix has been really spreading its wings. They're spreading to the coal community of Ravenswood, West Virginia, where Berkshire Hathaway and One are converting this old aluminum factory into a microgrid-powered industrial site. The Phoenix's wings are spreading across the state of West Virginia to Weirton, where Form Energy is soon going to be breaking ground on its first battery storage manufacturing facility where a steel plant once stood. They're reaching even further to Wyoming, where TerraPower is building an advanced nuclear reactor at a retiring coal plant, to the Four Corners region, where Photosol US is building a solar project adjacent to a shuttered coal site. I think I just saw an announcement this morning out of West Virginia again at Gilbert Creek, which there's a new manufacturing plant producing clean green ammonia on a reclaimed coal mine. I'm just saying, it is happening all across. And with the announcements and the adder, if you will, for energy communities, it is making former and current energy communities irresistible for investment. So today, DOE is rolling out some new tools to help companies and communities chart where can that money best be put to use. So the first tool is developed by National Energy Technology Lab, which Brian leads in partnership with our Department of Treasury. It's a map that shows which energy communities are going to be eligible for those additional credits. And then there's a second tool, the second visualization tool, which is developed by our Pacific Northwest National Lab, which shows where we have retired or retiring coal plants, which can be repurposed and reinvested in. Both tools are at that energycommunities.gov website that Brian just referenced. At the same time, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, so we got all these tax credits, right, and we have all these grant opportunities as well. And so thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, this morning I'm announcing a couple of things. Two projects, one going to North Dakota and one to West Virginia, going to receive a total of $16 million for FEED studies, front-end engineering and design studies, to determine how they can extract critical minerals from coal mine waste streams, of which there are an abundant amount across the country. Those efforts are going to help us stand up a first-of-its-kind facility that produces essential materials for solar panels, for EVs, for wind turbines, et cetera, of course, while at the same time cleaning up polluted land and water, and of course, creating good-paying jobs for local workers. We're also announcing today another $450 million available for new clean energy demonstration projects on current or former mine lands. And those projects could focus also on a range of technologies: geothermal, energy storage, power plants, carbon capture. They're going to show us how we can reactivate or repurpose existing infrastructure like transmission lines and substations, while obviously creating new opportunities for economic development, as Ali Zaidi was referencing. So, as with all of the projects that are being funded by the infrastructure law, the grant projects, we are requiring community benefit plans for successful applicants. And when I say that, we think it's very important that projects work in tandem with community, with workers, with labor, to make sure that this project is designed in a way that uplifts the whole community. 20% for DOE projects, 20% of the applicant score is based upon those community benefit plans. So we truly, don't think these projects are going to be successful unless they have meaningful community and worker engagement. And of course, today's announcements just really build on our ongoing investments in energy communities. For example, just last month, we made $750 million available for projects that recycle clean energy supply chains and pull supply chains products into places where coal operations have closed. That's through our Advanced Energy Manufacturing Recycling Grant Program. So anyway, our hope is that as these projects get up and running, we're going to find ways to replicate them across the country, and I have every confidence that we're going to succeed on this point because of all of you, whether you are here representing labor or investors or NGOs or communities. We're going to make this happen. And now we have the resources underneath it to ensure your success. So we're going to make this phoenix and this economy soar across the nation to every pocket, but especially to these powerhouse communities. So thank you for joining us today, whether you're an old partner or a new face. We're excited to work with you. Thank you.
Secretary Granholm, thank you so much. And in case you're losing track of all the opportunities for coal communities, you can go to energycommunities.gov/funding to our clearinghouse. And Secretary Granholm, it is such a great pleasure to work with you in the Department of Energy, and our partnership with multiple agencies can come to fruition through our rapid response teams. And so now it's my great pleasure to ask the Deputy Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Janet McCabe, to the table to tell us a little bit more about those rapid response teams where we're meeting communities where they are. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everybody. I'm so proud and humbled to be here with my administration colleagues and with all of you to talk about all the things that are happening and to come. It's a day of announcements and opportunity, and for those of us working in the Biden-Harris administration with the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, every day is a day when we get to talk about new opportunities for communities across the country. And this particular effort around energy communities is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I come from Indiana, a state that has certainly seen its share of contributing to the economic development of this country, and where many communities are suffering now. So it's a personal honor as well as as part of my job. I want to talk about our rapid response teams and say that for us at EPA, these really reflect how EPA has been doing its work for decades and decades, which is to be in communities when there's a spill, when there's an accident, when there's a community that's concerned about pollution in their communities. EPA is there talking with the people who live there and working to address those concerns. So the rapid response team model is one that really resonates with the way EPA does its work, and we've just been so gratified to see the model take off in the context of this important work. It really grew out of the specific asks that we heard from the communities that are represented in the room here today and all across the country, and things that we heard from community members in formal and informal requests and conversations. In my conversations with governors and state environmental officials, I heard, you guys, you're killing us here. You send us to 17 different agencies. We don't know what they all are. Nothing is coordinated. Please help us find a path that is manageable and that will lead us into the opportunities that we know are available. And listen to us as we tell you what the hopes and dreams of our community is, what the opportunities are in our community for the kind of economic expansion and revitalization and development in these communities that we want to have, that our residents want to have. So the first opportunity was our rapid response team pilot in Wyoming, and that grew out of conversations that we were having back in the summer of 2021. It started with that premise that state and local leaders were best able to describe their visions for future economic growth in their communities, and that energy sector transformation and expansion would be most successful and really would only be successful if federal programs could support those visions. And so our first task was to listen and to learn. We had a series of virtual meetings back in the summer of 2021. Almost everything was still being done virtually. We met with county commissioners, with community members, with community-based organizations, with labor and workforce advocates, business leaders, and our team began to understand how federal programs could best assist the transformation. Since the fall of 2021, the governor's office has been absolutely instrumental in the Wyoming Rapid Response Team's progress with local and statewide leaders, with team members, led by career staff in our Denver regional office. We've had bi-weekly calls with state leaders in energy policy, business and economic development, environmental quality, workforce development, and other issue areas. Bi-weekly calls. That is a significant investment of time from all of those people. In 2022, we wanted to make sure that IRA and bill supported communities and those statewide goals. And our rapid response teams are helping to make this happen by building relationships in communities, just like we did in Wyoming, with community members where investments can make the biggest difference. As of the spring of this year, right now, our work in Wyoming has seen investment from the Economic Development Administration, USDA's Rural Development, EPA, and the Department of Energy, and there is more to come. The Wyoming Rapid Response Team led to the kickoff of strong teams in the Illinois Basin, led by USDA Rural Development, in the Four Corners of New Mexico, which you've heard already, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, which includes, as you've heard, work with the tribal nations Navajo and Hopi. And that rapid response team is led by DOE's Los Alamos National Lab. Each regional rapid response team does its work differently, as it should, from a project-based approach in the Illinois Basin to a relationship-building approach in the Four Corners to a combination of the two, which is what is happening in Wyoming. And given the experience with these three initial teams, I'm so glad to hear that our memorandum of understanding on rapid response teams has now been signed by all of the IWG agencies. John mentioned how hard it is to get 11 federal agencies to agree on anything. And then to actually root something for signature, really a nightmare. But we got it done. And you'll note from the two-year report that has been put out that we're going to be standing up 5 new rapid response teams this calendar year, including one in Pennsylvania that EPA will lead, and the others will be in eastern Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, and southeastern Montana. This is a model that has worked, and it's so gratifying. I want to mention 2 other EPA-specific things, since this is a morning of telling you about things, 2 opportunities that are just really promising in this work particularly. The IRA is allowing EPA to make incredible transformational investments in environmental justice and empower community-driven solutions in overburdened neighborhoods through $3 billion in environmental and climate justice grants and other assistance that will let communities lead the way as we address long-standing pollution, disproportionate pollution, and climate impacts, which are facing too many people in communities that have been forgotten and overlooked for too long. One of the ways we're doing that is through our Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers Grants Program. That is a lot of words. I am not a big fan of acronyms, but I think our folks really hit it out of the park with this one. These are our EJ Tic Tacs. These centers are designed to help underserved and overburdened communities across the country gain access to the investment opportunities that are available through bill, IRA, and other federal programs to invest in clean air, clean water, and our clean energy future. They will provide free technical assistance and capacity building to assist communities understand what grants to apply for, how to maximize their chances of success, and how to manage a grant once they get one. And for those of us who have been working in these areas for many years, I know that having a resource like this for community organizations is truly transformational and something I'm so proud that the federal government is delivering. Last thing I want to mention, amazing, amazing opportunity through IRA to catalyze economic opportunity in the green energy future is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is created by the Inflation Reduction Act. It holds $27 billion in competitive awards, grants that will reduce pollution, lower energy bills, and create good-paying jobs in communities across the United States. We are working closely with our colleagues to bring in federal and stakeholder expertise in building this critical program. We expect to open competitions in summer of 2023, that's this year, and we'll be sure to be communicating updates through our partnership with Brian and the Interagency Work Group, which, by the way, is such an incredible communication vehicle for people to go to one place and find all this information. So thank you again. Thank you, Brian, for your leadership. Thanks to everybody for being here. I'll turn it back to you.
Well, Janet, thank you, and certainly there's a tremendous team across all the 11 federal agencies that are working with passion about making an impact and not leaving communities behind. And with that, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and call on some voices from communities to help us ensure that we are taking all of these opportunities across the federal agencies and putting them to the greatest impact and to the greatest effect. And so first, I would like to call on Tom Corman, who's the Executive Director of Appalachian Voices, to share with us, Tom, how we can make this the most effective for the communities in which you serve. Tom, please come to the podium.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. And it's so exciting and dare I say energizing to be in this room with all of you today. I was walking over here from the hotel early this morning and thinking back to the many years of collaboration with many of the people in this room, doing two important things that I think helped lead us to this moment. One was leveraging the public funds that were available under previous administrations to demonstrate what can happen when greater investments are made in transformative ways to give back to communities that have been powering the country for generations. Another thing was to come together and advocate coal communities, energy communities across the country for a much larger federal response, much more in line with the extent of the need facing these communities. And then it was, just an incredible thrill and gratification for all of us when the Biden-Harris administration came in. And in the first week in office, one of the first things that they did, that you did, was to act on that. And with the EO on tackling the climate crisis, established that commitment to environmental justice and to energy communities, established the Interagency Working Group, which brought us here today. And that was just the beginning. The IWG reached out, continued to accept input and collaborate with community leadership as it developed its programs, as the administration began the work to develop what would become the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And sure enough, the president and the administration took that next step with the IIJA and the IRA, and we saw those orders of magnitudes greater investments in communities that deserve and need that investment the most actually come to fruition in statute. And that too was done with collaboration and input from the communities standing to benefit from it. So today is just incredibly exciting because I think the work ahead of us is going to be even more demanding and even more consequential than anything we have done together so far. And I think that everything that has been announced today reflects that reality, that just increasing the order of magnitude of the money that we are investing in something is absolutely necessary. We've been making that case for a long time, and we're incredibly grateful for the commitment from the President and Congress. It's incredibly necessary, but it's not sufficient. I think there's a mutual recognition between all of us in this room that the collaborative effort to make those investments and implement in the best possible way is what's going to turn transformative investments into true transformation on the ground, that realizing the transformative vision of the big federal investments, of the IWG, of the President's commitment, realizing that vision in reality is going to really come down to a lot of the nuts and bolts of practice. And the way to get that right for each individual situation, each individual community, is through this constant dialogue and conversation that we are continuing now. So I'm really excited to hear about the rapid response teams today from Janet McCabe, and building off work that the EPA has already been doing, but bringing 11 agencies together to get on the ground and to recognize and address the tremendous capacity and technical assistance gaps that exists for the communities that need this assistance the most. If they didn't need it, they would already have the capacity. They would already have the practice bringing in federal money and dealing with all of the bureaucratic requirements, federal grants. But I can tell you that our communities do not have that, and the federal effort to contribute to that capacity is just incredibly important. Really excited about clean energy on Minelands, and in particular, the Department of Energy's commitment that Secretary Granholm underscored to center community benefits. Again, there's no guarantee that just making big investments, doing big projects is actually going to benefit communities in the best possible way. But baking that into how the money is rolled out is a really good protection that communities can follow through on. Also, just incredibly excited to hear from Secretary Yellen about the 10% adder for energy communities to bring clean energy on the ground. Colleagues of my organization, Appalachian Voices, and the Central Appalachian Network have been demonstrating through the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund what a relatively small boost financially can create in terms of bringing on scores of projects that otherwise would not have penciled out or gotten over the finish line in places where it can be a little harder than others to get great generative clean energy projects going on the ground. So that additional boost, in addition to what we're doing on the ground now, the 10% adder is just going to be incredible, and rolling that out in a holistic way that considers actual needs on the ground, thinking about things, as the Secretary alluded to, around the workforce and how we get apprentices out there. We've been working with local community colleges in Central Appalachia to train folks to do these installations and then setting them up with apprenticeships when they graduate. That can be taken to another order of magnitude entirely with this kind of support. So in closing, I just want to recognize that we face a pretty Herculean task here, doing something truly unprecedented at a scale that many of us in our communities have not had the privilege of working at up to this point. The only way we're going to lift that is in a coordinated way and together. And the understanding of that, I think, is just infusing this room. So it's with a lot of enthusiasm that I can say I look forward to working together with each and every one of you going forward, and just capitalizing on the amazing opportunities that our collective efforts and the commitment of the administration are providing for us. Thanks.
Tom, thank you very much, and thank you for being a voice of the communities. Next, I would go to the private sector and how we're going to put this together. And so I'm going to ask Hi Martin, from Chief Development Officer for D.E. Shaw's Renewables, to come to the podium. And how are we going to connect the communities to the private sector and make these investments a reality.
So, first, thank you, Brian and team, for having us. Look, I and our organization are new to this group. So first, thank you, and second, certainly want to keep it brief because we're in learning mode and want to listen to all the great ideas that are here. I think where I'd start is the orientation that we have and the focus that we have is in projects. We see the world in projects, and we're thrilled, and our projects have been catalyzed by many of the announcements that have been made here. Today, obviously thrilled to hear of the new tax credits and many of the workforce development programs that are available through federal programs. But we spend all of our time in specific communities and specific projects, and that's the lens that I wanted to share here. I think many of the policies that have been announced today and certainly announced recently through legislation or otherwise has catalyzed several hundred millions of dollars of investment that we have committed to communities, specifically coal communities across the country, in New Mexico, in Utah, Louisiana, Virginia, West Virginia, to name a few. And really, projects are people. When you just really boil it down, we are in a project community. That is county commissioners. That is folks that are coming out of a job in a coal mine looking for a transition. That is landowners that are trying to figure out how to best use their land. We put those projects together, and the policy signals that we have gotten has clearly signaled us and driven us to make those kind of investments and really develop, build, own, and operate for the long term those clean energy projects. This is solar energy projects, wind energy projects, battery storage projects, and without that kind of clear policy signal, those commitments wouldn't have been made by us and certainly by our peers in the private sector. I think I would add just a few additional notes here. One of the best ways to signal investment to these communities is clear guidance. And I think the administration has done a very good job on short notice getting that information out on certainly quick notice and implementing admittedly a huge piece of legislation. So thrilled to see that clear guidance and hope to see more of that soon to signal investment directly to those communities. Two, strong supply chains matter. We say that, but truly you got to get equipment to a project to build it. It won't get built otherwise. We've all seen that challenge in the last year. So thrilled to see those investments. Third, workforce training specifically in communities, and I think it's a nice, easy word to say, and it's a very hard thing to do. You have to find hundreds of people that are willing to do the work that is available and the programs that are available, the rapid response teams. Partnering with community colleges is key because, the truth is the composition of the work in the previous energy communities may be similar, but may be different than those in new energy communities, and we have to recognize that and understand how we make that transition. And last, thinking about how permitting and real project implementation matters materially. Explaining the differences between a solar and storage project and a coal plant is important. It's important for communities, it's important for workers. To make sure that that is known and clear and the community can accept that is hugely important, and we spend a lot of that time thinking about that on a regular basis. So I'll leave it there and certainly welcome thoughts and comments from the group. We live and spend all of our time in these communities where we have these projects, so please do find me afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for the work that D.E. Shaw is doing. Next, moving on to when you put the blueprint together for projects, we need capital, and I'd like to go ahead and offer up Adam Altenhofen for the Senior Vice President from U.S. Bank. We know that we need the capital. We need to ensure that communities have efficient capital absorption as well. And so, Adam, please offer your comments.
Great, thank you, Brian. And yeah, first off, just want to say thank you to the working group, the administration for having US Bank here. We're also a new voice to this room, so we appreciate the invitation and the ability to participate and share our story as well. So at US Bank, we are a tax equity and debt provider to the projects that I mentioned. So we finance solar, wind, and storage projects in my group in particular. We're also a large community development organization, so we are highly focused on community development, economic development, and job creation. So we're extremely excited about what the energy communities adder and what this working group is focused on and the ability that it will bring to these communities and what it means for a just and inclusive energy transition for all. I think want to kind of focus on a few things. First of all, look forward to reviewing the guidance that was released today, so thank you for that. Look forward to looking at the tools as well. I think there's a lot of questions as to which communities qualify for these projects, so we are excited to see the guidance. There's a lot of capital waiting to be deployed to finance solar, wind, storage projects within energy communities, but a big question mark, of course, is whether or not it qualifies for the 10% adder. So with these tools, with the guidance, this will unleash investment in these communities, support economic development and job creation in these communities. So we're eager to look at that, and we look forward to that. Sticking with kind of Chaim's comments too on the guidance, transferability guidance also, we're eager to see transferability guidance as well. Tax credit transferability is a new feature in the IRA that will further unleash more capital in this market, create liquidity to finance these projects. Tax equity becomes the most challenging part of the capital stack to finance these projects. So with transferability, we really see the opportunity to deploy more capital, support these energy communities in meaningful ways. We also look forward to partnering with the EPA as we see these projects in brownfield communities, understanding what it looks like for private investors and the potential for liability for these existing brownfield sites, particularly if they haven't been remediated. Environmental liability is something that banks take very seriously, so I think that another portion of the guidance will be focused on is kind of the definition of brownfields. How does that existing liability get transferred to potential owners of the asset? I think also transferability could also help mitigate some of that risk as well. Lastly, I don't see Jigger anymore, but other ways that we can continue to partner with the federal government is to continue to support the Loan Program Office and the guarantees provided by the Loan Program Office. We're currently working with them on investments in tribal communities and look forward to continue to do so. So thanks again for having us. Appreciate it.
Adam, thank you so much, and shameless plug. The Loan Program Office has authority for $250 billion in revitalization of existing energy assets. And so we covered that in the first IRA webinar. We will have another webinar in a few weeks. Next, I would like to invite Heidi Binko to come on up. Heidi is really one of the pioneers in the Just Transition as Director of the Just Transition Fund, and a great pleasure to ask her to offer some last comments.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. It's really an honor to be here today. First, I just want to thank the President and this administration. I started this work over a decade ago, and it's just incredible to see where we are. And, on behalf of all the communities that we serve, this is about real people, and you're making a difference in the lives of real people in rural America, and it's incredible. So it's just really an honor to be here. So thank you to the administration, Secretary Granholm, Secretary Yellen, and Director McCabe. It's just an honor to hear the announcements that you mentioned this morning. And I also actually wanted to send an important thank you out to Senator Manchin, because he's been such an amazing champion of coal communities for years, and we would not be here had it not been for his efforts. The actions that were and the announcements that came this morning are going to be completely game-changing for coal communities across this country. The environmental communities adder will boost investment in rural America and is going to go a long way to make sure that these communities can create economic opportunity and not just rearrange the deck chairs, right? The $400 million for clean energy demonstration projects is really exciting, and what is exciting to us at the JTF is that creates immediate jobs in the reclamation and remediation sectors. It has skills. The opportunities are for workers that have immediate skill sets to do those jobs. And then finally, the announcement about the rapid response teams is really, I think it's really going to be critically important, because what we've heard from communities for a long time is that we need to have coordination between the federal, state, and local levels. It's just simply too hard to navigate what's at the federal level. So all of these things, not just the announcements themselves, but the combination of these tactics are going to provide a meaningful shot in the arm, catalytic investment that's going to enhance our ability at the Just Transition Fund to do what we do and reach more communities every day. The Just Transition Fund is the only national philanthropic initiative that has been solely focused on creating economic opportunity in places where coal plants and coal mines have closed. We've been at this work for the better part of a decade, and we do three things in these places. First, we help communities plan and respond to closures. Secondly, we've been working to identify generalizable and replicable models that we can lift up and share as we convene local community leaders from all across the country to really help generate the spread of ideas. And then thirdly, and most importantly, which is what I would like to focus on today, we're working to help communities access federal funds specifically for economic diversification, workforce, and broadband projects to scale these projects, right? We all know that without access to connectivity and broadband, it's just a fundamental non-starter on economic development for these communities, and energy communities, which are primarily in rural America, the hardest hit, face tremendous barriers of access. So I want to encourage us to think about that as we go forward. Through our Federal Access Center, which we've launched in the last couple of years and expanded, we are helping communities navigate the complex federal landscape of opportunities, and we're also helping them address a range of barriers from eligibility requirements, match, and other things through specific grants and technical assistance. And so I think today, just again, looking out at the progress that we've achieved, it's really today when the real hard work begins. And I think first and foremost in our mind is making sure that communities can access these funds and put them in a way that works for them so that they can realize tangible economic benefits. That's the first thing that's before us today. We also, secondly, have to think about early planning, because we know that the best outcomes happen when communities can plan early. And then thinking a little bit more in the long term, I love the thought of the rapid response teams and the integration between state and federal local. And I would just encourage us to think a little bit more beyond the short term and think about the long term. Many of us within our network have been advocating for a congressionally chartered nonprofit to look at this very issue. The coordination that's going to need to happen is going to extend well beyond this administration. And so we need to think about the long term. So with that, I'd like to end and just thank you all again. Thank you for making this incredible and historic investment in these communities. We're thrilled that you have recognized the complexity of the issues, the importance of bringing labor, workers, family, economic development practitioners, the private sector, the public sector together, because it's an incredibly difficult issue. And we're just thrilled that the administration has really done this in a way, Brian, I want to especially thank you and Briggs for this, of making sure that communities are heard and that all of these solutions are community-centered. And it's incredible, and we're thankful for the historic investment in place-based industrial policy. That's going to be a game changer here. So thank you.
Well, Heidi, thank you for your tireless work in communities and with this, and in the Just Transitions Fund's the great expertise that you provide. Heidi mentioned Briggs White, the Deputy Executive Director. I want to give a great shout out and thanks to all the work that Briggs does. And thank you, Briggs, and the entire IWG team. With that, I'd like to close with just a couple of comments. And one, I hope that everyone who's listening, whether on the live stream or here in the room, can see that this is clearly not just an administration priority, but an administration passion. from all 11 agencies. Truly, from the bottom of my heart as the executive director, it is a great honor to be able to bring together these agencies on this wonderful topic. We have tailor-made programs from clean energy demonstrations on abandoned mine lands to abandoned mine land reclamation to all of the energy adders within the Inflation Reduction Act, just to name a tiny, tiny snippet of all the opportunities that we're trying to coordinate for energy communities. With that, I'd like to conclude this morning's briefing and thank everyone again for being here. Thank all of the federal agency partners and the voices that we've heard from the communities and the private sector here this morning. We want to be sure that we are leading the world in tackling the climate crisis, but we are doing it in a way that we are not leaving a single community behind. And thank you all for your support in this, and have a great day.